Welcome into the first ever episode of my brand new series, Dynasty Team Breakdowns, where I'll be going through every NFL team and evaluating their dynasty relevant players, both projecting how they'll be on the field in 2026 and how their dynasty value might be affected by the 2026 season. We'll be going through these teams in alphabetical order, starting with the Arizona Cardinals all the way down to the end. And with that being said, I'm John, you're watching John Talks Ball, and let's get into it. To begin the video with a little bit of context on the Arizona Cardinals, they finished the 2025 season with an abysmal 3-14 record, firing head coach Jonathan Gannon and acquiring head coach Mike LaFleur, former offensive coordinator of the Los Angeles Rams. That feels very promising for an Arizona Cardinals team that has lacked a bit of hope in recent years, and that defense was not very strong to say the very least, leading to a pretty insane run out for current QB1 Jacoby Brissett. The quarterback room for the Arizona Cardinals currently includes Jacoby Brissett, Gardner Minshew, and Carson Beck, who's sitting there as the third stringer, brought in the third round of the 2026 NFL draft. With all the assets in this quarterback room, it's pretty easy to say that we don't have the 2027 quarterback one for the Arizona Cardinals sitting in here yet. With Jacoby Brissett, we know he's in the middle of a contract holdout, and it's pretty ugly when your NFL team is in a contract holdout with Jacoby Brissett to be your starter. If you guys can sell Jacoby Brissett in Dynasty for anything, I'd pretty much be taking it. This contract situation doesn't make him more exciting. It certainly makes him less exciting. If you can get a second round pick just because he's a starting quarterback, that would be lovely. I would even take 2/3 here. But with that being said, I'm not sure if I want to wait and see if the situation changes with Brissett. I mean, worst case scenario, he could end up off the team because Gardner Minshew, while he is definitely not an NFL caliber starting quarterback, is probably also more close to replacing Jacoby Brissett than they would be to paying Jacoby Brissett big money. So with that said, Minshew is just quarterback depth, and that third option down there in the form of Carson Beck would probably be the most interesting to dynasty managers. I recently saw Carson Beck go as early as the second round in a 2026 rookie draft, which to me makes him feel like a sell. We know that quarterback success rates once you get past the first round just go way down. And with a guy like Beck, not a good prospect, doesn't really have the arm strength to project as an NFL quarterback, and probably just got pushed up draft boards thanks to getting all the way to the college national championship before losing to Fernando Mendoza and the Indiana Hoosiers. So with that being said, pretty much every name in this quarterback room is a sell. I expect this team to perform pretty poorly once again and for there to be new blood in the quarterback room starting in 2027. So let's move in and check out their running back room. Moving into the Arizona Cardinals running back room, I do think one of the main reasons why this team is so fun to look at from a dynasty perspective is they are stacked at almost every single skill position, obviously disregarding quarterback. So, to begin with the running back room, we know Jeremiah Love was brought into the Arizona Cardinals with the third overall pick in the NFL draft. Jeremiah Love is a 20-year-old elite prospect coming from Notre Dame, comparable to the names like Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Ashton Genty. He's just one of those guys that comes into the league. He's going at 101 in most dynasty rookie drafts, and it's just going to be one of those untouchable assets that should come in and smash right away. The only concern is obviously Arizona projects to be a pretty bad offense, thanks to having no starting quarterback. So we could see a down year one, kind of similar to what we saw from Bijan Robinson back after he was drafted, and I wouldn't get too panicked if Jeremiah Love doesn't have the smashing year that his prospect profile says he should be able to have. He's ranked overall at 14th on Keep Trade Cut, which I do find to be a bit aggressive, but we know how the community treats running backs as a whole. People don't really bake in the fact that running backs get injured at a much higher rate than any other position, and their values can tank thanks to those injuries in a much greater way because of the way the RB position works. Overall, I have him at 24th overall in my dynasty rankings, and I do think he's a tad overpriced while also simultaneously being buyable in your dynasty leagues, thanks to the stink the 2026 class has on it. I wouldn't be setting away future picks like a 2027 first or a 2028 first, but if you can figure out a way to acquire him with a package of, say, Jahmyr Gibbs being sold for Jeremiah Love and a plus, I do think that could be worth checking out. I will discuss these next three running backs of the room in a bundle because they all kind of reflect a similar situation. Tyler Algier was brought in on a $12 million 2-year deal, $6 million a year, to be the team's RB2 or at least have a role. I do believe Tyler Algier was thinking he was going to be the running back one before the team drafted Jeremiah Love. That is a sad, sad irony as he becomes the backup to another elite blue chip running back prospect. But I do think he's guaranteed to have a roster spot. This is a contract we saw similarly in the form of Chris Rodriguez for the Jacksonville Jaguars. It does signal that the team has a plan for you, and I don't think he's going to be left off of the 53-man roster come season time. With James Conner and Trey Benson, this is where it gets interesting. James Conner signs a 1-year rework deal, around a valuation of $5 million, so really not that much, clear depth signing. And then you have Trey Benson, who's just been sitting back there waiting for an opportunity for oh so long, had that mysterious injury end his season last year, and now becomes a bit of an interesting stash candidate because one of the two between Conner and Benson isn't likely to make the roster. We know last year in 2025, only three teams, with my fingers showing the correct number, held on to more than 3 running backs heading into the season, those being the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the San Francisco 49ers, and the Baltimore Ravens, all disregarding fullbacks. We're counting that as a different position. So I do think there's an outside chance, or rather a solid chance, that either Benson or Conner ends up on a different team come the start of the season, which is why I do think everyone in this running back room is at least worth a spot on your dynasty roster. With that being said, let's move over and preview the wide receiver room. To complement the chaotic rooms we've already seen on the Arizona Cardinals, the receiving core is also pretty muddy, especially when you consider Trey McBride, who we'll cover in the tight end section of today's video. The wide receiver core is headed off by Marvin Harrison Jr., but before we break into the receivers, if you're enjoying the video this far, hit that like button, comment down below if you're excited to see future team breakdowns, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what I'm doing next, which is going to be that Atlanta Falcons team preview coming early next week. So with that being said, let's start by breaking into Marvin Harrison Jr. Marvin Harrison Jr. was selected to the Arizona Cardinals with the 4th overall pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, one of the most highly touted prospects we've seen at the wide receiver position in a very long time. Marvin Harrison Jr. has been disappointing, which I do think is relative to those insane expectations people placed on him back before the draft. With Marvin Harrison Jr., he's sitting overall at player 62 on Keep Trade Cut, which just feels so wrong. I think that's a tad low for a player of his caliber. We've seen flashes from Marv showing that he can be a high-end wide receiver 1, and people are just low on him for all the wrong reasons right now. Obviously, Marv put together a very injury-riddled season last year, some heel issues, missing time there, as well as that appendicitis surgery he ended up having late in the season. I do think Marvin Harrison Jr.'s value would have been less hurt if he had just gone on IR after that heel injury, and he didn't end up playing some bad games down the remainder of the season thanks to being injured. It feels like people are just dinging his value far more than they should be. With the other wide receiver in this room, we have Michael Wilson, who broke out for a 78, 1006, and 7 touchdown line on 12.9 yards per carry. That is a very real breakout. But we know the rooms on the Arizona Cardinals are just so dang crowded with skill players, so I do think that is likely the best we're going to see from Michael Wilson throughout his tenure, at least with the Arizona Cardinals. We know that there was so many major outliers with this 3-14 Cardinals team. Marvin Harrison had those injuries. Brissett was slinging the ball 40+ times a game. The Arizona Cardinals featured one of the lowest neutral run rates in the entire NFL, thanks to the fact that their run game just couldn't get anything going. I do think that's going to get a little bit closer to the league average, thanks to having Jeremiah Love on the team. Overall, the run out of this wide receiver room and Michael Wilson having those insane stats was just such an outlier, it feels kind of unlikely that he's going to repeat those stats. Now, let's move into the tight end room and finish off the dynasty relevant assets. Now, kind of a cut and dry tight end room here, which is nice considering how crazy the rest of the roster has been, headlined by Trey McBride, who just set the single-season reception record at the tight end position, as well as making a first-team All-Pro, so very impressive by McBride. He's going to turn 27 in season this year, and is a great elite tight end hold for your leagues, especially when you have a tight end premium. Behind him, Tip Ryman and Elijah Higgins. Tip Ryman, mainly a blocking tight end, especially considering that the 12 personnel is on the rise in the NFL, with Elijah Higgins being back there as kind of that hybrid receiving option. If Trey McBride was to go down, I do imagine Elijah Higgins would take over the receiving duties, so of the two, I'd rather be stashing Elijah Higgins. Now, with the dynasty roster overview out of the way, let's get into some superlatives for the team heading into 2026, where I'll be going over my favorite dynasty buy, favorite dynasty sell, and favorite dynasty stash for the Cardinals. Now, there are a few guys who are worth a buy look in today's video, but my favorite of those is going to be Marvin Harrison Jr., like I mentioned before, ranked 62 overall on Keep Trade Cut versus 38th overall in my personal rankings. I am still very high on Marvin Harrison Jr., elite draft capital, and an elite receiver profile, but a guy who's kind of been screwed over for his first 2 years in the league and may even end up screwed over in his third. The situation on the Cardinals has been brutal. He had that injury-riddled season last year, and originally had a quarterback in Kyler Murray, who, while not bad, certainly just didn't fit the scheme that we were seeing trying to be run in Arizona. Those two skill sets just didn't match perfectly. Marvin Harrison Jr. had a solid rookie season, but it just disappointed solely due to the fact that he was one of the most highly touted prospects we've seen in a very long time. With that being said, through 2 years, he has 103 catches, 1,493 yards, and 12 receiving touchdowns for 14.5 yards per reception. All the signs are there to say that Marvin Harrison could take a huge leap. So to me, Marvin Harrison Jr. is certainly my favorite buy on the Cardinals. Just for reference, 62nd overall on Keep Trade Cut is going behind names like Trevion Henderson, Christian McCaffrey, who just turned 30 years old, and Luther Burden, the king of yards per route run. While Luther Burden might be on a better offense, Marvin Harrison Jr. is just likely a much better wide receiver than Burden himself. All three of those names, I would be moving for Marvin Harrison Jr., especially if you could do so straight up. And let me emphasize here, this is not a redraft buy. I'm not sure how high I'd be on Marv in redraft this year, considering the situation is a little bit volatile, with Jacoby Brissett throwing to him, as well as Carson Beck, who unfortunately could be mixed in late in the season if the Cardinals are losing games. The coaching staff may want to see what they have in Beck. As far as that goes, he's most certainly a buy at price in Dynasty Fantasy Football because that's a whole different game. Marvin Harrison Jr.'s value could still rise this year with solid performance, even if the Cardinals' passing game isn't the strongest. With that being said, let's move into my favorite sell of the Arizona Cardinals. Moving into my favorite Dynasty sell of today's video, it's important we remember what a sell is in Dynasty context. I don't hate any of these players, and I do believe that these players may be at their peak value, or there's just a gap between how the market values them and how I personally think they should be valued. With that being said, today my favorite sell on the Arizona Cardinals is Trey McBride. Trey McBride is going to be 27 years old in season this year, so he's essentially going to be in his prime. He just set that single season reception record, and I don't think the value on Trey McBride is ever going to get higher than it is right now. With the league that features over 0.75 tight end premium, if you're a contender or a competing team, I totally see the logic behind holding here, and if you're going to sell, especially on a rebuilder, you must get a haul. So here are some deals I saw on the Dynasty Daddy trade database, sourcing real trades from real leagues that you could use to get off of Trey McBride. Trey McBride was sold alongside a 2028 second in exchange for a 2027 first, a 2028 first, Devontae Smith, and Tucker Kraft. This is the kind of haul I would want to sell Trey McBride. Devontae Smith, obviously, I'm going to be a bit more on the sell side of him, but acquiring him here makes him able to be flipped directly after, so I don't mind it. Tucker Kraft, definitely a name that you should be watching right now as he heals from that ACL tear. If he comes back healthy at any point in the 2026 season, he would immediately become the first receiving option on that Packers offense, which we know is historically pretty solid. The other name I was considering here besides Trey McBride was Michael Wilson, but I do think he feels more fairly priced to me as it stands. The major issue with Wilson is that Arizona just has so many mouths to feed that it would take a lot, like I had mentioned before, for Michael Wilson to have a similar run out to that of what she just did. With Jeremiah Love now in the mix, Marvin Harrison Jr. healthy, and Trey McBride, I just think Michael Wilson is priced next to some names that have far more upside, like a Ty Simpson, who I mentioned buying in a few days ago's video, as well as Parker Washington, who I think just has more upside in his own offense than a guy like Michael Wilson. With that being said, let's move into my favorite stash on the Arizona Cardinals. So looking into my favorite stash from this Arizona Cardinals roster, it's going to be Trey Benson, the running back who's buried on that depth chart. But let me clarify what a stash is and why Trey Benson is my favorite stash as well. A stash in Dynasty refers to a player you're going to hold on your roster not with the intention of getting major points performances, but rather someone you're able to hold that will gain value that ideally you can sell later. So, as I mentioned before, with Trey Benson, it's just pretty unlikely that teams roll into the season holding more than 3 running backs on the roster. If he ends up on a different team, I can guarantee you he will spike in value. There's not many worse landing spots than the 4th string running back on a team, and he's going to be better than a lot of those RB3s that are already out there, so I can't imagine he would have no interest on the market. He also hasn't been bad when he's played. There are a lot of running backs who have gone out there and shown that they're inefficient or just overall bad players. With Trey Benson, you have something closer to a mystery box, which means teams are most certainly going to be interested in taking a shot. So, because Benson is a young running back that got decent draft capital, a new opportunity could end up making him sellable or even a cheap producer if he finds himself a role. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed the video where I covered every Dynasty relevant assets on the Arizona Cardinals in the first episode of our team breakdown series. Next up is going to be the Atlanta Falcons, so hit that like button, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel to make sure you don't miss that episode. With that being said, I'm John, you're watching John Talks Ball, and I hope you have a great day. Peace.